Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the November 16th, 2023 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Committee. My name is Justin Brandon, and I'm the chair of the committee. When called on, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Do not approach the podium until vacated by previous speaker. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments, questions, and testimony to the committee, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is unnecessary to repeat testimony previously given by others. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to the chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or providing officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and or remove that person from council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you're parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or in the Arts District parking garage south of City Hall, staff may provide parking validation ticket to you. The agenda and documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select on the Downtown Design Review Committee meeting and then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call roll?
Brandon.
Present.
Black.
Here.
Sarer.
Here.
Schmid.
Here.
Trujillo. We have quorum.
Perfect. We have quorum. So item number 2 on the agenda is approval of minutes. Do we have any discussion on any of those previous minutes? If not, I entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Platt motion, second by.
I'll second.
Okay, Schmid. Okay, motion passes. Okay, item 3 on the agenda, cases withdrawn, there are none. Item number 4 on the agenda, continuous requests, there are none. Item number 5 on the consent docket, there are none. Item number 6 on the agenda, cases for individual consideration. We have a little pause so we can, perfect. Okay, case for individual consideration, DTCA-23-00037 at 415 Robert S. Kerr Drive. Laura?
Thank you. And I'm going to remember today. Laura Griggs, Planning Department. Good morning. This item, first we're going to run through the slides, and I had a lot of slides. Hopefully most of you are familiar with it. It's literally a block away. I thought my screen was working, but it's no longer working, so let me get here. So the request is from the museum for the drive-through bank facility that's been vacant for quite some time to the north of them to demolish the majority of the concrete structures, walls, and put in a parking lot. They provided information, that's their short-term goal. Their long-term goal is an expansion of the museum itself. Whoops. So there, as referenced in the staff report, they initially were going to be retaining the vertical concrete walls that are along the west property line. They're very close to the adjacent building. After discussions with staff, they modified that and also included retaining, I'm going to call them the sevens, that you would drive under at both the entrance and exit drives that face each other, that you can see in this view. That one there is on the exit. So their modified proposal is to retain the cantilevered concrete that you drive through. But then demolish the remaining of those. So there are several different features on this site. What you're looking at there are the vertical walls on the west property line that they are going to be retaining at this point in the proposal. And while we're looking at this, I'm going to just go ahead and mention that what you noticed on their proposal, and that was at the request of staff. Currently, what you're looking at here is the entrance drive, which is the easternmost drive. It's immediately adjacent to the entrance and exit drive for the parking lot that's on the corner. So it is an enormous curb cut. And they modified their proposal to eliminate that entrance drive and have the entrance that be from the other existing entrance-exit drive to the parking lot that they currently own on the corner, so that reduced the width of that driveway. And so this is looking kind of on that whole area, because when you had that enormous curb cut with two adjacent driveways like that, the sidewalk was kind of non-existent, which makes it very difficult for pedestrians. And so you see the back of the museum on the left and the site, and there's the back of the museum. I will note there is no public access on the north facade of the museum currently. And that is the parking lot that's on the corner to the east of this site that the museum also owns. And let me go back. So we'll get to the overall. So this, currently, I'll just note, this is not listed on the National Register. However, in phase one of the intensive level survey of downtown, which was done in 2009, there is a specific reference to this site. And I am going to probably mess with some of the verbiage in here, but this was not 50 years old at the time that that survey was done. However, it was identified that it was, I want to get the right adjective because I don't want to use the wrong one. And I apologize that I did not have it in front of me. There's actually a picture of this in that survey, and then there was a blurb that it talked about it. So this is brutalist style of architecture, and describes the buildings that evoke a strong expression of the nature of modern materials, usually concrete. It was a popular style for governmental and institutional buildings. It was a short-lived architectural movement. Most examples occurred between the 60s and early 70s. And at the time this survey was done, they referenced that there were 4. I've only been able to, in my mind, to come up with 3. This was one. Stage Center was the second one. The third one is that ONG facility on E.K. Gaylord with the strange walls that the steam comes out of all the time. Some of you are nodding and some of you are looking questionable, but, and I mean, I never thought about that as anything, but I never could figure out what number 4 was. In evaluating this proposal, you have several different criteria that are in all of the design districts. They have indicated, as I stated earlier, that temporarily they're wanting to use this as a surface parking lot. It's currently operating as a surface parking lot. They're wanting to get more parking spaces in it so that their income stream is higher than it currently is. Ultimate goal is for expansion of the museum itself. Not really sure yet what that is. Obviously, that's down the road a ways. So staff was concerned in looking at this proposal, as we have expressed to the museum staff, that not only does this have a specific style of architecture that we're losing, it might not be your style, but once you lose it, you lose it. But it also, this was the first drive-through bank in Oklahoma City, which I wasn't aware of till we started researching it. So it has a piece in our history. And you have several opportunities to, when you look at structures, and you've seen this before from us, where you can agree with staff or not. And the applicant has provided their specific information in here, and where we could, we quoted from it in the staff report to acknowledge the information they provided. So in looking at this, obviously it's not minimum 3 stories, which is what we require for new structures in downtown. It does not meet our maximum setback, which we would require for new structures downtown. At some point in the future, if they come through for a new building, we'd be evaluating that building on the criteria, if that was still the criteria at that time. The significance of this, staff feels, is fairly high from not only an architectural standpoint, but from the importance in history. As I said, it's our first drive-through bank that we had in Oklahoma City. And the applicant has stated that people don't feel safe around the property after dark. They've identified challenges with property damage. They specifically reference broken windows, graffiti, trash cans burned in the alley, individuals sleeping on top of the teller booths, interior spaces has been vandalized. So as much as you see above ground, there's also stuff below ground. And as I referenced in here, it was actually connected to the building on the opposite corner. Initially, people have gotten into the subterranean portions and have damaged it. They have also indicated that there's asbestos in the drywall mud, and they're currently going through the process of getting approval so that they could remove that. Staff doesn't have a problem with the removal of the asbestos that they referenced. We don't have a problem with removal of anything underground that you don't see because we don't have purview of that. Our concern is with what's above ground. The applicant also states that there's no viable economic use for the existing underground structure and bank teller windows. The only current viable economic use of the property, parking, is diminished by above-ground structures, and the existing structure presents public nuisance. So the committee can consider any of the criteria, any of the information that the applicant provided in your decision. Staff believes the property is an historic and architectural resource, as described in the staff report. We did not receive any information to suggest that the structure's integrity poses an imminent threat to public health and safety. As the intended immediate use of the property is to continue as a surface parking lot, staff does not believe that the considerations for economic feasibility are relevant at this time. While the buildings are no longer needed for their originally intended purpose, retaining the structures and continuing to use the site for parking could still occur without complete demolition of the structures. Improvements such as lighting could be pursued to address concerns regarding safety and security of the site. While the benefit of a future proposal to redevelop the site for the expansion of the museum may have the potential to outweigh the loss of the structures, staff does not believe the current proposal to continue in its use as a surface parking lot outweighs that loss at this time. For these reasons, staff does not support the request for demolition. So you had, under staff recommendation, if the committee determines that the site is an historic resource and an architectural resource, or that the proposed or anticipated future development does not outweigh the loss of the property, then the staff recommendation that you consider is to deny the application on the basis the project doesn't comply with the regulations and guidelines of downtown design district zoning ordinances referenced in Section D of the staff report. The other option would be if the committee determines that this site is not an historic resource or an architectural resource, or that the proposed or anticipated future development outweighs the loss of the property, then you could approve the application on the basis the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the downtown design district zoning ordinances referenced in Section C and D of the staff report. However, if you determine to do that, there is a condition that we discussed early in the staff report that I hadn't brought up yet that we would like you to include, and that condition is the sidewalk takes priority over the parking lot entrance exit drives. The elevation of the sidewalk shall remain constant, and the entrance exit drives designed to angle up or down to meet this elevation. Also, the sidewalk will need to be demarcated in some way across the drives. This can be done with color, texture, or lines indicating the east and west edges of the sidewalk, and you're starting to hear this condition from staff on a regular basis.
Okay.
So did you have any questions of staff?
I just want to add that this was not included in the staff report. We hadn't confirmed whether this was official, but that the State Historic Preservation Office has made an official determination of eligibility on this property, that it is individually eligible. And that's part of that 106 review of the asbestos abatement. So that's kind of the next step from that survey, and it's a formal consensus determination between State Historic Preservation Office and the Environmental Protection Agency that would be funding the asbestos abatement.
Is that ruling for the entirety of the property, or is it for the brutal concrete elements that make up the majority of the architecture? Did they distinguish between the two?
No, it is just for the First National Motor Bank at 415 South Robert S. Kerr. They didn't go into detail on this part, but not that part, et cetera.
I'm assuming this asbestos abatement is below ground, or is it in the teller booth? Like, I guess I don't understand where the location of the
I
asbestos
believe they
is.
indicated it's in all the drywall, so it's in the teller booths, and
Okay.
then it's everywhere down below ground.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Did you say that was part of the funding of the asbestos abatement
So
process?
because they were seeking assistance through the Environmental Protection Agency, that triggers Section 106 review with the State Historic Preservation Office to determine whether that federal undertaking is going to have an adverse effect on a historic resource. So in their review of that, they said, yes, it is a historic resource. It is individually eligible for the National Register. Removing the asbestos in and of itself is not an adverse effect and could proceed. If additional federal funding was sought to demolish the structure or do other work that would detract from the historic character, then that would be an adverse effect. So we see asbestos abatement all the time. They removed asbestos from the First National Center, and that was done in coordination with State Historic Preservation Office and historic tax credits and that sort of thing.
So they're not
So-
together?
Well, and I had a meeting with them where it was discussed I asked specifically the question, if you don't get the federal funds to remove the asbestos, is that going to impact your project? They indicated if they don't get the money they were seeking, they would raise the money elsewhere.
I think the question that I have is, if they get the money to do this abatement, are there any strings tied to the money that are, it has to, because now it's a resource. So if you pursue tax credit money on a certified rehabilitation project, you're supposed to hold on to that project for 5 years until that is done. There's no strings that are tied to money that's received to abate that then would impact. I don't know the answer. I'm truly just asking the question.
I believe that's correct. So long as they're not using any federal funds or other federal involvement for subsequent work up to and including demolition, they could qualify for the asbestos abatement funds, and that would not be considered an adverse effect. And there would be no kind of follow-up requirement on what comes next.
Sorry, I can't even see the green button because of the glare, but now I can up from here. Sorry. There we go. Now I can get it to the other. I apologize. As I said, my screen was working when I first got here, and then it went off, so I can't see it. And so if you had no additional questions for me, I was going to pull up their presentation, which I think that is full screen. Full screen right there. Okay. Are you going to drive?
I'm not.
He's going to speak first, but then I'll do
Okay, I'll just leave it here. Okay.
All right, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, I also have some folks with the Museum of Art with me, one of which is going to walk you through this. So I want to talk just kind of briefly about this idea of preservation. When we think of preservation, my belief has always been at the heart of that discussion is the ability to reuse a structure or building for something in the future. I've had the opportunity to be involved in many demolitions in the downtown area, and that was always at the heart of the discussion. If we just wait long enough, someone else will be able to come in and make an adaptive reuse of the structure, and we could preserve it. Well, here, we don't even really have a structure. We have old bank teller drive-throughs, which is a use that, frankly, it doesn't exist anymore. More and more banks are going away from even having the teller drive-throughs because everyone deposits checks via their telephone or direct deposit. This is not a structure that faces the right-of-way. Oftentimes, when we think about what is of concern, it's what is front-facing, what does the traveling public see? Here, because of the orientation of the teller booths, they're at a north-south orientation. The most front-facing structure along Robert S. Kerr are those, as I'll use staff's term, the kind of interlocking sevens. So when we first filed this application, we didn't propose to keep those. We proposed to have two drives. So we sat down and we worked quite a bit with staff in an effort to try to compromise, understanding that we have operational impacts that are at play as to why we want to demolish this, and you'll hear more about that from my client. But understanding that perhaps some people might like the way that this concrete looks. So the most frontward-facing, outward-facing pieces of that were the ones that faced Robert S. Kerr, those interlocking sevens. There was a concern then raised about the ability to have two separate access points because of points of conflict with pedestrians. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic that exists there going to the courthouse and other places. So we agreed, modified our site plan. We would remove that second point of access, limit it to one point of access on this site, and retain those things that front Robert S. Kerr. I think it's worth noting the staff report, the staff identifies the style of architecture, and the staff said, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. It's worth noting that staff points out that this movement, if you could call it, was a short-lived movement. Well, I would submit that there was a reason for that, right? We spent thousands of years trying to recreate what the Romans have done. There's a reason that some things are timeless, and there's a reason that some movements died, and that the pieces left behind have been slowly taken away because they don't work. Even if it did work, I would again submit to you, this is not a building. These are north-south bank teller. There is no way to adaptively reuse this. And that's what preservation really is preserving things that can be reused. Preservation for the sake of preservation doesn't make any sense. It will continue to just sit there and rot, be a magnet for crime and other problems. Our goal is in the long term to be able to bring to you a wonderful new project on this site. But in the short term, we have operational impacts that require these be taken away. So we would ask that you, and we're happy with the condition, by the way, that staff has as it relates to the sidewalk. So we would ask that you agree with staff's alternative recommendation and allow us to move forward with the demolition. With that, I'm going to, unless there's questions of me, I'm going to turn it over to my client to walk through their presentation.
Well, thank you. My name is Michael Anderson. I'm the president and CEO of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. So I'm at 415 Couch, just across the roundabout. So I'm going to walk you through The property, what we expect what we see the current situation of the property as being, and what our goals for that property are. So as you know, I mean, we are, as Laura mentioned, we're a block away. I mean, most of you probably have know the property fairly well. I'm sorry, let me see if we can do that. So I'm just going to walk you through a few recent photos of the property and the current conditions of the property. So you're seeing here some of the structures that are on the west and north side of the property. I'm going to note that we have a few persons in the back. This was just a random day when I went out to take pictures, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that have been happening on that property and why it is a public nuisance, we think, and why it does pose health and safety hazards. But I'm just going to point that out as something that is routinely been experienced by us and then by our neighbors that are right on Walker there. Our challenges on the current property is that, first of all, the motor bank is not a welcoming property to park. People that operate we have a parking lot immediately to the east of that as well, that's a little bit closer to the courthouse. As you'll hear, our eventual goal is to get rid of all surface parking and create a museum extension that goes on both of our parking structures. We're a ways away, but we have an operator that does our east side parking. They were not able to convert the bank teller property to hourly just because of the confusion that's posed by the tellers, cantilevered structures, by the fact that people didn't feel safe on that property. And I'll tell you some specifics as why people don't feel safe on that property in a second. They don't feel safe after dark, but then also during the day. Just a month ago, somebody associated with the museum, and I won't go into too many specifics, but somebody associated with the museum was assaulted on that property. So we did have to contact the police about that assault. That happened at about this time of day. So that was not something that happened at night. This is not just a public nuisance at night. This is a public nuisance during the day, and that wasn't the first time that we had to contact the police department about that. So as you see, the museum security constantly monitors the property and has made many calls to OKCPD for assistance. The property has been damaged in the following manner. There are broken windows. There's graffiti. Trash cans have been burned in that alley. That's why that picture that I started with was germane. We have had people that sleep on top of the teller booths. So it's not just a nuisance to visitors or people walking to the courthouse. It's a problem for people that are experiencing homelessness. It's our entire. This is not a healthy space for anyone right now, and I think we should take that into consideration. What we don't see is probably just as important. The teller booths and office spaces below ground are badly damaged. There is asbestos in those. And as David mentioned, the teller booth is sort of transitioning out as something that has any economic use, because people do use their phones or they go in person to a bank. A lot of times they do that because maybe there are language barriers and it's difficult to communicate, so people just don't use teller booths, and we don't see that as coming back. We see more and more that people will move to digital uses or even that in-person service. But again, that use is something that really is past, and nobody stepped in the interim to acquire the property for that use. The security booths have been destroyed. All the copper piping below ground has been torn out. Most of the electrical and data wiring has been stripped. The walls and restroom fixtures have been destroyed. Our night drop box leaks waters into office below, causing flood damage. When we're talking to staff about and to other people about, okay, is there any use for this? The one thing that was brought up to me is, well, couldn't you use that as some sort of storage or collection storage? That's, for us, the last place that you want to put a collection is below ground. Our collection is stored in the middle of our structure. Not just because of tornadoes and severe weather in Oklahoma, but more germanely because of flooding. And actually, last Friday, I don't know if any of you saw it, we had to cancel our members' opening because we had a water main burst and we had flood damage in the east side of the museum in our basement. So if we had something below ground again, that would be something that would be really susceptible to irrevocable damage. That's something you can't have with a museum. Water is your greatest enemy when you're preserving a collection. So that's the one use that somebody could think of that was brought up to us is something that we really would not consider. And again, there's 10,000 square feet of asbestos that must be removed on this property. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so in summary, we don't see that there's a viable economic use for the existing underground structure and bank teller windows. So just to give you guys a sense of what this would mean for us, if we were able to convert this to hourly parking, and if we were earning the same type of income that we're earning on our other property, that would be about $176,000 a year. So that's 3 to 4 salaries that we could pay for as we're fundraising for what you'll see here in a moment. So it's significant for us. And right now we have a few monthly parkers, and that's it. So it's something that really would make a huge, huge difference to a nonprofit. And, there are 4 major museums in Oklahoma City. It's a small pie. We all fight for the money, and this would be something that would be huge for us as we're trying to do something bigger and better for the city. The only current viable use, again, is parking, and it is a public nuisance. So why did we buy the property? And as you can see, we bought it because we envisioned expansion. So the facility across the street was opened in 2002. Our collection has grown by more than 2,000 objects since 2002. So we've doubled in size in that time. And our Chihuly collection was acquired since we moved into that building. So we have to find storage for all of those objects, other glass objects. We've increased by, again, 2,000 objects. A lot of those are photographs. We don't have any cold storage. So we have some real needs for expansion that we hope to undertake. It might happen a decade from now, but we really do need that. We only exhibit about 5% of our collection at any given point. So again, we could have much larger spaces than we do at the museum. And we lack a lot of amenities that are important for revenue. So we have to do our big fundraiser at the country club in Nichols Hills. We would love to do that on our property. We have to move things off-site because we don't have all the amenities that we need, and that is costly for a nonprofit. So tomorrow we do envision expansion on both of those properties. So, ideally, you saw that little triangle that comes off the north side of the building. That was originally built so there could be some type of, I'm from Minnesota originally, we call them skyways. I'm not sure what the terminology is in Oklahoma, but some sort of skywalk to the other side of the building. I mean, we would love to close it and to expand. We don't know if that would be something that would be possible. But for us, it's to expand our property, to create something that really is the jewel of downtown. We want to stay downtown. And, as you know, you're here. The Civic Center's there, the courthouse. We are landlocked other than that north. That's the only place that we viably could expand our property. We need those additional spaces to serve our mission, so more gallery spaces, more educational spaces, more spaces for our collection storage. We envision a sculpture garden amenity at some point. I mean, I think ideally we would have something like that on I'm blanking, I said Hudson over there, something where you would, as you're going by the streetcar, we could do something outdoors. We don't have that space now, again, here. And we would eliminate surface parking across those 2 properties. That's where we want to get. If we could do that today, we would do that. We just don't have the funds right now for a $40 or $50 million expansion. All right. So what we see tomorrow is something like you're seeing up there. So we did a design, kind of a preliminary design competition right before I moved into the position in 2019. So before my time, we did that. And these are some of the architects and firms that were involved. And these are examples of the sort of work that they did. The one that you see, the OKCMOA Annex, we also engaged AHMM after I became the CEO to do a site plan. And at that time, their strong recommendation was that we move. Really, it wasn't viable for us to build up. We needed to build north. And at that time, we only had the property on Hudson, and that was their concept. But that actually doesn't really work as well. I mean, it's a beautiful building, as you see there. It doesn't work as well because there's no way to get from our current galleries to that property. So we really did need that other property so you could move in, so you wouldn't have to leave the building to re-enter another annex of the building. But that's what we see. We see some big dynamic. I mean, it would, of course, be 3 or more stories. We would want to double our size. We'd want a lot more collection space and a lot more places for people downtown to meet up. And we want to add to the density and the walkability of the city. So how do we build a bridge to the future? Well, the first is to have that income stream that's vital for us as a nonprofit. And what we will do is we will preserve the cantilevered structures, these examples of brutalism that you see along the street. I'm just going to point out, of the architectural styles, so it's interesting because we're not talking about a building. We're talking about architectural features or structures. You see this raw concrete, which is true brutalism. It was a style that emerged in Britain in the 50s and really spread to Eastern Europe. It was kind of a socialist utopian style. Kind of petered out pretty quickly. There are a few important examples in Boston, New Haven, some other places in the United States. So we have brutalist elements, but it's not a brutalist structure in the sense that you don't have these same properties throughout down below grade. So we're talking about brutalist elements. So we would keep some of those elements, but it's not a true brutalist structure like, say, the City Hall is in Boston. So this is the other cantilevered structure we would preserve. Our short term is a open parking lot where people would feel safe, where people could use it for the courthouse, for events at the museum, for the library, for all of those things, for City Hall, for anything that's going on. Again, it's a income stream for us, and we would demolish those rest of those structures to ensure that it is truly feasible. And in the future, again, we're doing this so we can get to the other spot. If we could do that today, if we were coming to you today to present a new structure, that's what we would want to do. We just don't, we're not there yet as a nonprofit, so we have years of capital feasment studies and fundraising ahead of us, but that's where we're going. And if we're going to stay downtown, and we want to stay downtown, that's where we have to go if we want to grow, and we do need to grow as an institution. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for the applicant?
So I appreciate your presentation. The curiosity, first I agree with what's been said, and that's a really challenging thing coming from an architect who does like to keep all of the historic components of the city. I'm looking at the long game. So obviously, if you had come with this is our design, this is our site, this is what we propose to do, it would be a vastly different discussion because there would be something to reference. We've had buildings that have gone down in the past based on grand schemes, and then nothing happened, and we have blank lots, and we have buildings that are gone. I see what you're saying about safety. I know that we've had lots of conversations here about homeless components. What I don't see is one, is there a parking lot that works that keeps any additional, not all? Yes, I like the forms. Yes, I think that they are valuable from a historic standpoint. Do I think that they need to stay, all of them, at this point? No, but I don't see a solution because it seems like there are a couple of the concrete elements that actually could stay and not impact your site at all, your parking lot. The other thing is, I don't see anything with respect to site lighting, which is one of the big primary concerns with respect to the safety of the site, and that seems to be absent from the presentation. There's no street lighting, there's no pedestrian lighting, there's no lighting of the parking lot. I think that would obviously be part of a bigger discussion, but there's no conversation about how this new lot is going to be dramatically improved and not just be it's a parking lot. So I think that there's probably a balance between what's being proposed and what staff is requesting that could be a very successful solution for an interim spot between now and a building. So again, I'm looking at the long-term solution. I do think that that's ultimately going to be a building in which there may be none of these structures remaining in the long-term solution. But I think in the interim solution, one, there might be some of these structures that could be retained and still be able to achieve a parking lot. I don't see anything, well, one, subgrade not under our purview. We don't have anything that would be for us to discuss about subgrade. So second, you have the little teller buildings. I don't see those as being a big component with respect to, one, they're existing non-compliant. Two, they're not viable to be reused. I don't think it's in the city's best interest to just keep small teller buildings when they're not viable. But I would like to know if there's been any consideration of a parking lot that gets all or the vast majority of the spaces that you're trying to achieve, but still keeps some of those structures that just don't happen to impact your design, and then light. I do think light. You did do trees. I was appreciative of the fact that there's some trees. I think that they've been they're more of an engineered layout of trees rather than a pedestrian experience layout of trees. I think that that's just part of a bigger discussion. But light seems to be the biggest component of battling homelessness, of at least addressing one component of spaces that the homeless use. If there's light, it's not as.
And I'll point out on the items for consideration under lighting, when I asked them about lighting, because I did ask them that, they indicated they were going to install lighting on the existing concrete structures. And so I just wanted to make sure you did see that. So I think you're referring to more as parking lot pole lighting. Is that what you're
Well,
thinking?
I'm thinking more of a site-wide approach to lighting.
the lighting.
That addresses the entirety of the site and not just individual locations.
I'll try to figure out how to get to my pictures. Yeah, I don't think I can do it from here.
Tony, let me, real
Yes, sir.
quickly, if I could address, I'm going to do it via, there we go.
There, okay.
So what if as part of this application, we agree to retain this piece right here?
That's definitely heading in the right direction. If you go to your demo plan, there's another one. It happens to be on the north side. I realize that is not as big of a street-facing issue, and it does become a component of a visual barrier to the alley. So yes, that was
This?
one of the ones. Yeah, if you go to yes. I don't know that one is as much in my mind, but yeah, both of those are outside of your parking lot.
Yeah, so I think we could agree to keep this one that I'm indicating on, which is the far north structure, and then this one, which is the far south structure. To your point, it doesn't impact the parking, and it eliminates the operational problems that we're seeing. So perhaps they become the most desirable parking spots because they're covered.
I was going to say they're going to become the hail.
But the rest of them are just problematic.
But I mean, to your point, you're right. We do need to there needs to be lighting, that's added to the structure, and that is when this has been morphing. We've been, trying to work with city staff on this. And so when we decided to keep the cantilevered structures, that was part of what we communicated to Laura, was that we would light those. But I mean, there may be more opportunities for light beyond that. But to your point, that's absolutely right. I mean, this is about safety. This is about, it's about, our economic viability for the museum, but it's also about safety. And we don't want to create the same problem. And that's what we're trying to move away from. So I think that's something that, yeah, absolutely, can and should be part of this. And I, to David's point, I think we would be happy to keep additional structures so long as they keep, help us with the sort of economic viability of the structure, as long as it does kind of still maintain, this moment in Oklahoma City history.
Was there any consideration for any other design that's not a parking lot for this site that potentially is more temporary until you continue your long-term plan? I mean, if you're holding 5% of, your gallery items in the museum, is there any consideration design-wise for, outdoor anything for this site? I think, as we're doing downtown design review, as we look at our zoning, is there any other use for the public to?
Maybe
Does
not.
it make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I mean, not necessarily for our collection objects, but maybe there's an opportunity to do murals. Maybe there's a way for us to engage local artists in a way that we haven't done. Say those, the western side of it. I mean, I think it would be difficult to use this. We have a use of what's called Carolyn Hill Park to the southeast of the museum, and you may know that we installed, you would know that we installed a sculpture there. We have a little bit more space there to install a few works, and that's where we would go first because of their visibility and kind of the ideal setting. So we wouldn't use this today as a sculpture garden. It really isn't a good use of that now, especially if you have cars that are anywhere around that. But there might be opportunities for us to engage with local artists. That's something that we've discussed. So it really just depends on, I think, yes, we can make this look better. We can make this more, we can make this something that I think will be something people will stop and look at as they're walking to the, courthouse and not avoid. That's, I think, where we want to be, because this, ultimately, we are an art museum, and so we care deeply about the aesthetics of it. And so it's, we want to make sure that this is something that speaks well to the museum. So maybe there would be an opportunity like that.
So what would our next steps be with respect to, so we're looking at potential other space, utilization of space on the site, and then also some discussions about some additional structures that might stay and lighting. Is this something that is a rapid turnaround? Do you have a reason why you're trying to accomplish this within a defined time period? Or is it something that we can discuss one more time?
Well, we have an immediate need to fix the problems.
Okay.
We have spent, I know this is the first time we've been before you, but we've spent many months working with staff. Again, originally we had both drives, we had everything scraped, so we have spent many months trying to compromise. Our hope is here that the 2 additional structures that we are willing to keep is the additional compromise we need to get us to the finish line.
Do you have a schedule for your abatement process that's currently underway?
January.
So really there's no, and is there a, because demo is going to happen after that. These won't be able to come down until that abatement process is complete. Okay. I mean, for what I'm looking towards a long-term solution here. I understand all the things that you're saying. As much as I would love to see them stay in a nice green field and they're just monuments like Stonehenge, I also realize the fact that we have to have viable properties. So definitely the compromise of additional retained elements helps me get to the next point. I would like to definitely see some lighting and the kind of development of the pedestrian experience along the roadway. I think that's going to be crucial as well.
Yeah.
So, but I would not have to, those 2 elements could be worked through with staff from my point. Does anybody else have anything?
We have people, at least one person who wants to speak, so I just wanted to
Very good.
point that out, because sometimes I know you get going and then you just,
Go right into the
Just
motion.
cruise right along.
yeah, you just keep going, yeah.
And I'll,
Anyone from the, okay.
go ahead.
I was going to ask if there's anyone from the public that wants to speak on this.
And while he's walking up, I'll just say, if this is to be approved with condition that things be submitted to staff, I would want to really pin down, as we're looking at that photo and looking at the site plan, exactly which structures, make sure we're all in agreement on which ones we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Good morning, commissioners and staff, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Randy Marks, 1115 Northwest 42nd Street. First, I want to be very, very clear. I'm a city employee, but I took the day off so I could come and speak about this as a private resident. I'm encouraged by the direction of the conversation so far today, but I don't think that it goes far enough. Destruction of the drive-through bank is an avoidable tragedy. It's a mistake that the entire community should not make. I've walked through this remarkable space dozens and dozens of times, especially in the last year. And with each transit, my admiration for the design of this work grows and grows. I think there's only really one flaw, and that is its association somehow with the term brutalism. Yes, it is an example of brutalism, but it is not brutal in any sense of the word. It's elegant, thoughtful, and a daring composition. Instead of brutality, it is actually rhythmic and graceful in its composition. Stand to the east over close to Hudson and look to the west, and you can see the audacious cantilevers in the design suggest billowing cloud masses with mountains rising around it. Comparisons to Stonehenge are really easy. but its forms are also reminiscent of Göbekli Tepe, the mysterious 11,000-year-old, think of that, 11,000-year-old ritual space in southern Turkey. Finally, in its powerful immediacy, it reflects the experience of seeing Rodin's Balzac, which recently graced our museum. In short, this is a work of public art that any aspiring world city should cherish. Let's remember another structure deemed to be in the way and not worth saving. The Center Theater, with its caved-in roof and filthy interior, was figuratively minutes away from being bulldozed into a parking lot. A small cadre stepped forward and saved that structure, and today, of course, it is the beloved, revered home of the Oklahoma City Art Museum. That same spirit of preservation and audacious transformation should be called forth again in this case. I'm not an architect, not even an artist. I'm a bureaucrat. Despite that, I know that the exceptionally talented architecture team that's working with the museum, if unleashed, could forge solutions that would save this entire structure and still meet the needs of the museum. There is no doubt in my mind that that is possible. This may not be the easiest path forward, but it is ultimately the one that will be the most rewarding. So, museum, friends and partners, we all deeply understand that you want to do the right thing. There's no question about that. But I respectfully request that you withdraw the demolition application and consider again before the destruction of something that is unique and beautiful and that forecloses any possibility of anything after that. Commission, at its very best, there really is no urgency to the demolition of this building, to its destruction. The application is premature, at best. I urge you to deny it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Randy, can I ask you a question? No necessarily opposition to a different use within the space. Are you tied more specifically to the concrete structures, or are you also looking at the small structures of the teller booths?
Speaking as a layperson, it seems to me that the smaller structure, the structures of the booths themselves are not as important as the overall concrete structures. It's that composition in its entirety, every single element, that to me stands forth and cries out to be saved.
Do we know the distance between the concrete structures north-south, approximately? What I'm curious is, what's the, what does a site plan look like? My request was, how many can we keep? I'm curious, what does a parking lot look like in a very broad brush standing, where they all do remain, but the parking lot is configured in a way, yes, those would become covered parking. Yes, I get that, they are. But is there a solution? And I understand completely that I'm asking for something that is in excess of what's been considered so far, and I see the civil work that's been done. But if the number of parking spaces that is adjusted is modest, is that something that would be considered? And I do realize we're not going to be able to answer this question today. I think it's just a viable study of, we have X, and then if we keep the structures for now, until we come and have a larger discussion with a building request.
So no, we can't keep those interior ones. It would destroy the ability to have flow through that parking lot. So if you look at what we're proposing now, we're really only proposing to take two of the architectural elements out. By keeping the far north and the far south, and keeping the things along Robert S. Kerr, keeping the Stonehenge-type elements that exist to the west, you're really talking about taking those middle ones out, which I believe are just 2.
Yeah, and Dave, there's a bigger issue.
Do you see that, Tony?
I do. That's why I'm curious is what is the layout? What does I realize the flow does change. I
Yeah.
get that. But what does
So-
it look like? if-
Well, it doesn't work. I mean, the internal circulation doesn't work. The number of parking stalls is impacted. It just doesn't work.
Sure, so what if you had essentially 2 separate parking garages essentially? So, I mean, not garages, but spaces, right? So you have this one that's to the west, then you also have one that's to the east. Obviously, when you're looking at this lot, there's no attendant there. They're using their phone to,
So the other problem with that, though, is part of the compromise was taking away an access point. So we've removed an access point, which further prohibits that kind of bifurcation of the lot.
Sure.
But there's a bigger problem. The bigger problem is that prevents us from eliminating the subgrade that we need to. So abating and filling in the subgrade, essentially. I mean, that's a huge public nuisance. There's no use for it. So by not removing these 2 central structures, we can't do the work that we need to actually have a safe and viable parking structure there.
Am I allowed to make any other comments?
And actually would like to talk about one other comment that I wanted to make was just recalling that we did, preserve the Center Theater. Let's remember that we preserve the Center Theater and are using it as a theater and as a cinema. There's no discussion of using this as anything other than parking at this point.
So my question would be, why is it there not a consideration of using it for something other than parking? Is parking the highest and best use? Do we need another parking lot? Do we need another parking lot there? We've seen the examples, as you pointed out, Commissioner Blatt, of buildings being torn down and nothing going into their place. Sometimes forever, sometimes for decades. So is this really the best move forward? Again, I'm not an architect. I am not convinced, though, that the underground space is absolutely useless. Really? That seems highly unlikely to me. And what other uses could there be for this space? Again, a lot of this goes beyond the point. It is not strictly a utilitarian point of view. Yes, I know that in the current mode that utility trumps everything. But in the case of saving something that is beautiful and unique, nothing like this in the world, and Oklahoma City has it, what could it be used for if it was saved in its entirety? I think that's the question that needs to be asked.
So I think what's missed there is there is no building. The reference you gave was a building. That the museum was able to create a reuse of that.
That's beside the point, though, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, if I might be able to speak freely.
Yep, sorry.
Thank you. This isn't a building. I think he referred to it as a public piece of art. Well, reality is this is privately owned property. We are doing our best within the confines of the operational needs to keep an important downtown partner downtown. By keeping the things that we're proposing to keep, we've really kept all of those elements. We're really just talking about removing 2 of the interior pieces and the teller booths. The subgrade stuff is not, as you indicated, has no relevance to our discussion here. There's no purview of those underground pieces with this commission.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting. I think that the fact that it's not a building is totally beside the point. It is an architectural structure. It is a significant architectural structure and also a work of art. This is not nothing.
We're in a really unique spot here, and that's the reason why I was curious. I hear all the things. Yes, it's what's below. we don't particularly get to comment on. That's outside of this, that's a conversation and a compromise that happens outside of this particular room where everybody gets to state their point. What I'm curious about it is, and I don't have a scaled drawing, I know what it takes for a double-loaded parking. I need 60 feet for double loading. I need 42 feet for single loading. I need X whenever it's one way with angled parking. And there's a bunch of different ways to solve the issue. I'm just curious, what would the number of spaces look like if the structures were retained? What would the spaces look like? And that's, it might be come back that, you know, we can get 90% of the parking spaces and we don't have to remove them. With respect to filling in, the abating and filling in, I would imagine that there's probably a solution where that could be filled in and encapsulated and be dealt with in a manner that is safe and secure and not be, what we're looking at currently is filling it in so that it's ready for a new building, rather than filling it in so that it's safe. So I gotta believe there's a solution, an interim solution. And I was initially trying to see what's the most that we can get out of this with the parking lot that's been presented. My question, not that I have an answer yet, is what's the most that can come if the parking lots, if the structures did remain? Do we have an idea of what that might be?
Well, as
In
Michael
par-
said, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tony.
In parallel with the abatement process that's gonna
Yeah.
be going on.
We can't demo the underground piece if those center structures remain. So regardless of the flow, and we don't believe that it flows and gives us the yield that we need, we can't move forward with the demolition of the subterranean piece if those center structures remain.
You could secure them.
You could what?
You could temporarily secure them until time that a building would be built, potentially?
Well, so now we're adding all kinds of operational costs to a museum that's, you know, a not-for-profit and is trying to do their best to respect what's there while having real needs to be addressed.
The cost to dig out those buildings and demo those large concrete structures would be a cost that would be saved in a scenario if, you know, would be cash in your hand, if those were secured in a manner that they did not leak, they did not have any access that somebody could get into them. What I'm saying is I don't know nor see that that's been confirmed.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking the question. And I'm not looking for engineered plans.
Sure.
It would truly be a test fit, felt tip on trace paper, the kind of thing that gets done very quickly and I realize I'm asking, is that something that would be considered to show?
No, I don't think we could consider that. I mean, at that point, really, we keep it the way that it is and wait for that time in which we can afford to build a structure. So basically, what we have below ground, if we're going to build on that property, we're going to have to demo what's below the ground. And I mean, that's not, you know, obviously we all know that. What we have below the ground right now is unsafe and it's unproductive to that site. It does leak. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So the costs that would go into that wouldn't actually mitigate any, we're really not gaining properties. Parking spots at that point. What we're trying to do is we are trying to get something that is economically viable. We're not getting rid of the problem, basically. We have a solution where we're not getting, you know, it's a compromise that doesn't get rid of any of the issues that we're having with it. So it doesn't get rid of any of the safety issues. It doesn't get rid of any of the, beyond the purview of this committee, it doesn't get rid of any of the below ground issues that we have, and it doesn't make it economically viable. So it's a compromise that, for us, doesn't yield anything. So we, again, as a nonprofit, we just wouldn't spend, we don't have the funds to do that. I mean, that's just not something that we would consider. We would be happy to consider the elements that maintain the above ground brutalist touches and structures, but we do need to eliminate those center structures.
think it's difficult for me because, I'm not an architect. I don't necessarily know, all of the kind of intricacies of this, of the site, what's below grade, et cetera. And obviously I know that the what's below grade is out of my purview, but it also kind of is because you're also kind of speaking to saving as many of these structures as possible. And so for me, it would just be nice to kind of have all of this detailed out, coming to the committee to say, hey, this is really only our viable solution. And I honestly don't know if that's been properly vetted because of what's been presented. That makes sense.
Sometimes architects consider themselves to be arrogant and always willing to accept a challenge. I don't know the dimensions. I don't have a scale. I don't have, it seems to me like there is potentially a solution that could save the cost of demo, save the cost of digging out the site and recompacting it. And if you're incorporating lighting, if you're incorporating it, it could address all of these issues. The blind spots are going to be there on the other side. If you have the sevens, the structures on the street, and if we kept the structures on the north and south side of the property, we would have blind spots there. So the 2 additional blind spots, yes, I realize. I just feel like there's potentially a middle ground that's actually, and I don't know it yet. I just feel like there might be a middle ground that could be considered during the abatement process. And then in the event that that is shown to be non-viable, then it's a healthier discussion on our part. I feel like there's an opportunity here for something that is win-win.
We think we've presented that by retaining essentially everything on the exterior of the site and allowing what is in the interior and has absolutely no adaptive reuse to go away.
So there is no desire to just,
No, there isn't. I mean, that's just what it is now. I mean, that doesn't, we don't gain any positive improvement to our sightlines. We don't gain, the reason that obviously our original, the problems that we have is it's not a safe site. It's right in the middle of the downtown. It doesn't have an economically viable use. That's why we presented it as we presented it first, and then we worked with staff to compromise. But it was a compromise to, it was to hear the concerns. That wasn't our ideal. We want a safe, economically viable spot until we can build a new structure. And we want to be able to pay our staff these next few years. We want to be able to fundraise for a new facility. And so that's why, we're doing everything we can. And every addition that we have of these, we're happy to compromise. But by adding these, we're taking away additional parking spots. We still have sightline issues, and we have health and safety issues. This for us is, we acquired this for our future. And so that to me, I know that, the brilliance of a design firm aside, there's, for us, this is still, our purpose here is to get to that point in the future where we can do something that's truly impactful to the downtown environment and stay downtown. So for us, by doing that, we don't gain anything by doing that, is I think is our position.
Any other questions for the applicant? So as we're looking at, and going back to Laura here, as we're looking at kind of our decision here today, And this is really difficult. It would be helpful for the committee if there's, in my opinion, a little bit more due diligence brought to the committee. I understand that you've been working, sorry, now my comments kind of address back to the applicant, but it would be nice if this was kind of brought to the committee. I know you've been working with staff for, these months, and we really appreciate that too. I think my concern is that it hasn't been brought to us, like as the committee, that ultimately is kind of making this decision, right? So, again, back to Mr. Blatt's point of, is there any consideration to looking at this site further?
So we can take a month. I mean, it's just, we've spent significant money with SRB and trying to work to a compromise. This is not a public piece of art. It's not. It's privately owned property. So when is your meeting in December?
21st,
Meeting in December is
December 21st.
December 21st, and then materials in November.
Well, so the one thing we have going for us, normally everything would be due next Tuesday, and that's what we say on the agenda. But there's actually 5 Thursdays in November, so I could give them till the following Tuesday, which would be the 28th of November.
What I'm going to be most curious about is, if there is another underlying thing that we're not discussing right now, that, yes, guess what? We can obtain 98% of the parking spaces that we've currently got on the site because we figured out a different layout, and then we don't have to demo the structures or incur the cost of that, and we don't have to dig out and recompact soil. But there's another factor if there's another factor that's coming into play here, I'd like to know it sooner rather than later, because what we're trying to do is, initially, I was more comfortable with the perimeter structures staying, but if there's a solution where the interior stays as well, that's even better. And I think it's better for the city. If it's not viable, again, I'm looking at the long-term solution,
Sure.
which is ultimately, there will probably be a building on this site long-term in some fashion.
Hopefully.
Well, but that's to be way down the road, but.
So what, I just want to make sure what you guys are wanting to see. So you're wanting to see, on the fly, they agreed, we could save this structure, we could save this one. Obviously, we don't know what that looks like on the proposed site plan, how that impacts, what's it going to do to the circulation, what's it going to do to the number of parking spaces proposed.
The two on the perimeter are actually in the grass. It seems to me like they aren't in the.
Okay,
current-
and having those shown so that you could see that, but are you also wanting to see
Do the
if we
interior
plop
ones-
down other of the structures, leave them, and put that on top of that new site plan, and see how that site plan works out around it?
Yeah,
Is that
happens
what
is
you're wanting?
North-south oriented parking spaces in that location would adjust to east-west. You'd still have to get past them. And if the dimension is such, that might be one-way it might be, I don't.
What I
know.
intend to show you is a site plan that shows how much we lose by keeping it. And I mean, so I understand staff has these deadlines. It's really one bit of evidence that I think we're down to. So we'll get that as fast as we can. Even if we were presented at the day of the hearing, you're going to have the evidence in front of you to make the decision. So we're going to show you a site plan that shows what happens if we keep those and why it's a problem.
And that would help us then
Yeah.
in saying,
Okay.
I understand, okay.
Thank you.
So does that mean we're continuing?
So that's what I'm hearing, and I believe the applicant's representative is agreeing to that? a continuance to the December 21st meeting.
Yep.
So I believe that's the motion that the chair is looking for.
I think viable in that discussion is a narrative, not a drawing, nothing engineered, but some
Sure.
short paragraph that says, we're gonna do lighting and we're gonna do pedestrian, what the experience is there.
Got a Sharpie and a napkin in my office.
I'm ready.
So entertain a motion.
Are you on?
Motion to continue to the December 21st meeting.
Yes.
To give the applicant an opportunity to just confirm parking quantities with a greater number of structures retained.
Mariana Sarur de Seca.
Okay. so
All right,
Maria.
Blas,
Thank you.
Sir?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is that coming up? Everyone vote. Looks like we're stuck here. Okay, there we go. Motion passes. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, next item for
Give us
individual
just a
consideration.
minute to reset.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Next item for consideration, DTCA-23-00054 at 400 North EK Gaylord. Laura?
Let me, sorry, I can't see that over there. Let me go here. So it's been almost exactly 2 years ago, it's actually 2 years ago this month, in November of 2021, during COVID, you might recall, we had our fun Zoom meetings. You approved a project for this site. I included just a minor blurb to that. You might recall there were several conditions of approval, some requiring the drawings to be redone. That was never submitted. So that CA will expire this month on the 18th without the CA having been issued. So we have a new project that's come in that is a little different. The original one was a mixed use. This one is an apartment complex. The original one had a parking structure that you might recall was extremely controversial, and we had a lot of discussion about that. This one does not have a parking structure, it has a parking lot. So that right there is a fairly large difference. So you might be familiar with these because they're the exact same pictures that you saw before. Currently, the site looks more like a park, and I think normally there's soccer goals that are there, and there is a parking lot that's primarily used by the Downtown Y. That is across the street to the north. There are various buildings around it, and one side is the elevated railroad tracks. So let me get back to that one. The proposal is to construct 2 6-story apartment buildings. This proposal has very minimal EFS included in the design. You might recall that was a big discussion the last time. There are some details, some cornice and dental details that do use EFS. Ironically enough, just in 1919 Sanborn maps had automobile-related businesses on this block. That's at the end of Automobile Alley. I find that interesting. So there were several items in here that I talk about under previous actions and other, and then in some cases you see conditions at the end. So the first one, parking lot and building lighting. What I say here is they're going to be submitting their lighting information at a later date because I need to see the specifics of that to make sure that it meets the requirements. Sidewalk across driveway. We can do rewind and you can hear exactly what I just said on the last case for this one. And I've got a condition about that sidewalk across driveways for this one as well. Rooftop equipment, I am indicating in here that we don't think we're going to have an issue because of where the units are going to be located, because of how tall the building is. But if in fact, and we include a condition that says if screening is required, they're going to have to submit a revision to the CA. Bus stop. Currently, there's a bus stop. We had discussed this the last time. The current site plan reflects the bus stop moving to the east, and we're including a condition that they need to get approval of moving that bus stop from Embark, because you just can't shift it over on your own. On-street ADA parking space, they're proposing to add an on-street ADA parking space, which is great. But you need approval from the Traffic and Transportation Commission and City Council for those. So we've got a condition included on those. And the last thing, and I did not know this in 2021, but in 2020, a mid-block crossing was approved at the request of the Downtown Y because they had the parking lot. And the Y agreed that they were going to pay for everything. They were going to pay for the lights that were going to go in and the striping and all of that. And it was never installed. So what I have requested that the applicant do is discuss this mid-block crossing with the Downtown Y, because if they're no longer going to have access to parking across the street, they probably have no desire, or maybe they do have a desire because they have potential members that are going to live across the street and want to walk, across the street at the mid-block crossing. So maybe the Y will still agree to put it in, but if it is no longer viable, then I requested the applicant let Traffic Management Division know so they could go back through the process and remove the approval for that. So in discussion, I had one area, which is from the DDF, which is a portion of this site is in the retail priority area. We've discussed that on a few projects. Along Broadway, actually, is where it usually comes up. The original project that was mixed use met the requirements, so we didn't have this discussion then. But since this has changed and currently doesn't have the mixed use component, I needed to bring this up. So both the buildings include an amenity component near the intersection that's shown on their floor plans. But they don't really clearly say what the amenity component would be. And it has a lot of glass that makes it look like it's a restaurant space or a retail space with the large storefront windows. And so it would appear that those could accommodate the possibility of retail or other active uses. And from staff's perspective, this may effectively address the desired strong building to pedestrian relationship and support a strong urban environment, because it's going to give the appearance that it has that component, even if it doesn't. But it's also possible that they might add a mixed-use type component to that at some point. So I just needed to bring that up. And so our staff recommendation includes 4 conditions that I referenced previously that hopefully will just allow you to read straight through them. If you have any questions about them, by all means, let me know. We have the same architect we had before, but he now has his own firm. So I welcome him back to the meeting. And do you have any questions for me before I let Isaac? Oh, I'm sorry. There was a lot of comments last time about the mature trees on 3rd Street that you might recall. So we have a demolition plan, and you will notice that it shows only 2 of those being taken out, because that's where the drive to the parking lot's going to be. So I wanted to point that out because we are retaining the majority of those trees. And the last time we had this meeting, we had a lot of people in this room. You all had a lot of letters. And I haven't gotten a phone call. So I'm hopeful that this redesign is done in such a way that their concerns have been alleviated.
Any questions for staff? Okay. Go ahead.
Do we have?
You can identify yourself and just,
My name is Isaac Hines, and as she mentioned, I now own Tradesman Architectural Studios, and I actually office in that YMCA building right across the street from this, so it better look good. I'm gonna have to stare at it every day. So 500 North Broadway. And I didn't know if you had my slides or no. The packet. If you didn't, it's fine. So to her point,
Katie can pull that up.
we did make an effort to address all of the previous lessons we learned with all the people in the room. So again, I'm happy as well that it's not going to be a repeat. We're saving trees. The mid-block crossing, to address that, we are negotiating and discussing with the Y right now. Do they want it? Do they not? Are they going to share our parking? That is in discussion. All of her conditions we agree to. They're not an issue. And the only other thing that I would further expand on, and Laura did a great job of it, is the retail requirement from the DDF. We did place those large storefront corners at the hard corner, so it does look like a retail component, and it continues the vibe of Automobile Alley and the feel, the rhythm, the style of that as you roll through it.
Katie has them,
Perfect.
but she has to drive it.
That's fine. So, yeah, right. I was just going to say that's the demo plan. If you want to toggle through them real quick, there's a few things I wanted to point out. Not that one. Keep going. Keep going. We had a lot of discussions. So this provides a total of 200.
Back to that one, so you might point out that that's one
Yeah,
of the
so
ones that has the amenity
It's
space.
the rounded corner right there.
On the
in-
left,
in
on the
pink,
rounded corner.
And that is on the very hard corner of 4th, E.K. Gaylord, Broadway, right at that intersection. So it faces the streetcar. And to further address that, you know, right now, the current needs of this city aren't retail. There's plenty of vacant retail around, so that's why we felt it was better to maximize housing, because that is a huge need with our growing city, especially in this area. So if you can keep going. There's a rendering of that hard corner. I just wanted to show them so they can get a feel for what that is, and I can talk, keep going. But overall, this provides us, while she's scrolling, a total of 200 and I believe 16 units. We're somewhere in that ballpark. I've slept since then. Keep going. Right there. So this is what that hard corner would look like. The white box on the left is the Oklahoman building, which is the YMCA, so you're looking east right here. And the two hard glass corners on the two buildings are amenity spaces, and we're still negotiating what those are. Is it a WeWork space for the tenants? Is it a game and lounge? Is it a restaurant? It's still up for debate, but this is what the feel will be, and it can accommodate any of those things to have a hard, active corner and continue that pedestrian experience from Automobile Alley all the way to downtown.
Do you remember that email I sent to you and you responded back and I thought I put it in my file and I didn't? Do you remember those questions?
I'm going to need you to be way more specific.
Okay, sorry.
good.
I had gotten some questions
Okay.
after sending out packet, sorry. Oh, sure, no problem.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tim Strange, Roserock Development Partners, 301 Northwest 13th. I just want to remind you all that this is an affordable project. It's 100% affordable at 60% of AMI. So all of these units will be affordable, and it will be the largest affordable project built in downtown Oklahoma City. So very important. Just wanted to be sure you were aware of that. And the reason why it's taken a couple years to get here is because of COVID, construction pricing, interest rates. It led us to break this into two phases. This is phase one, 2 buildings, and the surface parking. Phase 2 will be the 3rd building and structured parking. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the questions that I was asked dealt with, they were showing Arizona cypress as the street trees, and that is on the approved street tree list. We are currently discussing the possible revisions to that list in conjunction with the overall code update that we know is somewhere down there. But the question that came up was that that type of tree isn't typically a canopy tree, kind of like some of our other trees that we have downtown. And a comment was made about the renderings. And so that was one that the trees allowed So I can't tell him that he has to change it. We did have some trees that had to be changed, but that was one of the questions, if you
Correct.
wanted to
Yeah, I'll address that
respond
right
on
now.
that one.
My comment to Laura on that was, we love the trees along the street. I don't have an issue with them. It was on the approved list. If you want to take it off, I have no problem. I'll switch it up. Just tell me what trees you're happy with. I love trees. I love them all. They're all great.
There was a question about the landscape calcs, remember, and it had a tree that you had made the changes, but you hadn't updated.
I just didn't update the symbol, but
Yeah, he
yeah.
hadn't up, so there were, because they changed trees, they had some trees that weren't allowed, and they changed the drawing and forgot to change the calcs, and so that's why it was referring to a tree that doesn't show that.
And that's not necessarily a problem, because when you calculate the minimum points you need, I'm so far above and beyond that because the spacing dictates that you have to have X along the street within 75 feet of a parking space along here, and those criteria are what drove how many points I have, so I'm way above and beyond the minimum required.
There was a question about the proposed material for the outside corner. I'm not going to
The
pronounce this
coins.
correct. Thank you.
So
Is
the-
that some of the EFS stuff?
It is. The only place that we're proposing to use EFS right now is we're keeping brick down low because it fits with all the surrounding architecture, the aesthetics, the feel. And then above, we go up to the second level and it becomes stucco on a horizontal reveal basis. And then when you go up further, those reveals spread out. And so you're breaking down the scale, which is classic architecture in downtowns. And so the only places we have EFS are they make pre-made dentals, the little things that look like teeth on the bottom of the first floor cornice. The hard corners where you see the bump outs about 4 feet in each direction stacking, those are called coins. Those will be EFS blocks, surface applied to the stucco, but they'll have the same finish on the outside, so it will look continuous. And then the cornice at the very top is a pre-made profile shape out of EFS, but it will be skim coated as well in the same.
And then there was a question about the gates in the parking lots, and that had actually was something that I had asked him about and asked him to dimension it, because from the perspective, I was looking at it from the perspective of, are we going to be blocking the traffic?
And we will leave enough space for where a person is at the gate, either swiping their card or typing in code, that they will not block traffic or parking. There will be enough queuing space at the gate.
And the concern was about blocking the sidewalk.
Correct.
And so I think you had indicated to me there's enough room so that they won't block the sidewalk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then there was a question about the proposed stucco product.
Yeah, so I don't have a specific product. Stucco is stucco. It's a 4-coat scratch system. It's very durable. It lasts a long time, and hence why you have the reveals, because there are max spacings for those to avoid cracking and damage long term. It's a very durable long-term product when done correctly.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Your finish coat on the stucco and the EFS together are going to be identical, so it looks like a single product. They're
Yes,
not
sir.
going to appear to be different.
Yes, sir. There's going to be a mix of, we'll use a light sand finish and a medium sand finish depending on what level, and it doesn't matter if it's EFS or stucco. On those levels, that's what the finish will be.
And then you're right, stucco, very durable. It does happen here. We do have 126-degree temperature delta, and we do have some pretty unique. So I'm assuming that you're going to be working with a system.
Yes, sir.
Not a go out there and stucco it. It's going to be something that's a system that's going to be warrantied.
That's the plan, yes. And we're currently working with the proposed contractor right now and dialing in that system, but yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Oh, and then, yeah, a canopy tree, not
So-
a canopy tree, not
Yeah.
a evergreen columnar tree.
Perfect.
Anything that's canopy is going to be acceptable.
So what I'm hearing is a possible additional condition that you're talking about?
Sure, I mean, the
Change out that
tree that's there is an evergreen that grows to the ground. I think for the pedestrian experience, it's something that can be limbed up and provide a canopy, a shade.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is revise the street tree to pick an approved street tree that is a canopy tree.
Yeah, and this is what I said to Laura. I absolutely love Arizona cypress. I was at museums in Dallas this last weekend on a cypress-lined street, and it was beautiful. But those trees were 50 and 60 years old. So let's make this beautiful from day one. I'll pick a different tree. It doesn't matter.
I'm excited to see this project back. Haven't seen any movement on it for a while, and I completely understand the landscape and the environment. So thank you for bringing this back.
I think it's better than it was, so I'm really excited as well.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
You said the coining and the dentiles only happen on floor level 2 up, but the coining in the brick appears to be stucco instead of brick coining in your CGIs?
If we can jump back to that, I'll point it out and show you the best I can. There's a rendering. Keep going. No, keep going. Right there. So yes, the coins, the proposal right now is to run those on the corners down as well. And we're debating on how to make that durable because I don't want people bumping into it, messing with it. And they make different types of meshes for the EFIS that are different thicknesses, different gauges. I think they call them gorilla mesh. There's some weird word. No, Panzer mesh. That's what it's called because it's named after a German tank.
But does the guidelines not allow EFIS on level 1 as an exterior cladding material?
There's a percent.
Yeah, it's 25%, and I'm well below that. I believe it's 25. Is it?
There's a lower percent on the lower floors. It increases as you go up higher, and it's a guideline so the committee can approve any increased percentage, which I believe is what you had gotten into the last time.
Right. And because those are surface applied to the brick, it's not going to, if they get damaged, it's not an issue of water infiltration because your system is behind that is contiguous. So it becomes a maintenance thing to keep it looking good.
I think in the past, your concern with EFIS on a first floor deals with potential damage from not only people, but lawn care equipment.
Yep.
And there have been times when you've approved it with the understanding that everything, like lawn care-wise, was done by hand up close to the building, or it was all concrete up to the building, so they weren't going to be hit by a weed eater or a lawnmower or something.
I think for me, it's a tremendous step in the right direction. I love the affordable housing component. More humans living downtown is always going to be better, which will drive and increase retail opportunities. I am really passionate about the structural integrity of our sidewalks and utilizing the right tree for the right application. So I think a canopy tree selection will be crucial on that along E.K. Gaylord. I am passionate about people using the sidewalks on 4th Street to be able to continuously use the sidewalk and not be stopped by a car. And the site plan that we have shows the gate in a location that will be blocked, the car will block the sidewalk.
We've moved it since.
And I think I'm a very big proponent of like making sure the pedestrian experience for everyone that walks around this building, not the users of this building or just the YMCA, but guests to Oklahoma City experience this in a positive manner. So I would love to see the drawing again just to confirm that it aligns with the direction we're going. I'm closer on that side than just blindly approving and letting Laura take a look at it.
Laura, is that something that could potentially come back to committee in your administrative approval under communications to where we see that we can make a specific notion to that project? Is that how that works or no? Do
Well,
remind me.
So you're saying like it shows back up under AAs?
Yeah, so
Is that what you're thinking?
I don't know if it needed to be an administrative approval from that moving that the gate.
So you have a couple of options. One is you can add a condition and you could specifically say that it has to come back to you. Or you could give clear direction exactly what it is you're wanting to do and say, and they work with staff, they provide a revised drawing, and in this case, I would say, and the CA doesn't get issued until that revised drawing is part of that CA.
And then we also have that extra Thursday in the month, right? So potentially they could resubmit in the month and be back in December?
If they could. You have 5 items on your agenda already. You have the last one that was continued, so that's 6. And then you have this one. We haven't had a big agenda in a while.
I know that from my standpoint of view, and ultimately, it's the committee's decision, but moving that gate, I agree with you. We need to have a car sitting to where they're entering that and not block the sidewalk, the cars, the traffic. We have plenty of space to do that. She and I chatted on the phone. So if you want to make that a condition of this, I'm more than happy as a condition, and then I'll resubmit that drawing to Laura and she can get it out to you guys.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Do we know the dimension? If the gate is moved forward, what's the dimension between the gate and the sidewalk?
Sorry, say that again. I
If the-
couldn't hear you.
If the gate is moved forward, or into the site, what is the distance between the gate and the sidewalk?
Right now, it's looking like we have between 20 and 22 feet, which a parking stall is 18. So a car could sit there and you'd be able to get behind it.
And then the other thing,
Right there.
Okay, and I wish I could make that bigger.
oftentimes we find with gates is
And pull it
the detailing of the gate. Is it a swing arm that goes up? And what's the actual fob that someone is using?
Yep.
Are they using a clicker or are they punching in a code? And if they're punching in a code, then it's an arm that's going to be in the middle of the drive aisle. That'll be on an island. That'll have bollards. And
So I would love to answer that question for you, but we're exploring different systems right now. But to your point, we have looked at all of those. And if it is the arm that's on a fob, you just pull up, it goes up. That's the easiest. If you do the fob or the keypad, the post that's mounted on can be appropriately spaced from the arm back to the average like distance between the hood and the driver. We'll set that to where that car is clear of that sidewalk. And we have room to extend that island down if we need to even give it further. But right now I'm showing you've got 20 feet from the sidewalk to the end of that island, and I can push that to 22 if I need.
But you got what I was trying to say, which is you have the depth, which is great, but the width, because
Yeah.
the driver's on the left side,
Yeah.
which means there's a post in the middle of the
Yep.
drive aisle
Yep.
that eats into your 24-foot. So
And because we have the room to shift that if we need to put a small island in the middle, that's not a problem. I'm hoping that it's a fob system, but just like we're still negotiating with the Y about the mid-block crossing, if this is just for the tenants, I can do what I want. If it's for the Y, it has to work for them as well. So that's why I don't know that answer right now, Eric.
So did you say we could condition that they provided just a revised drawing at those two entrances and we can approve everything else? Is that?
Sorry, I have trouble, I can't.
That's correct.
Yeah,
He asked
I can
if you
get-
could
I can
just
get
put a
there.
condition.
Okay.
Yeah, with clear direction, so we know what we're looking for, yeah.
You see, like, yeah, make a condition at E.
So E was going to be revising the street trees,
Okay. F.
so that they select a canopy tree off the approved street tree list. So then F is going to be the location of the parking lot gates and however that's going to be worded. At least that's what I have written down.
Perfect. Thank you. Entertain a motion? Or sorry, is there any comments from the galley? Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that A, the sidewalk takes priority over the parking lot entrances and exit drives. The elevation of the sidewalk shall remain constant, and the entrance exit drive is designed to angle up or down to meet this elevation. Also, the sidewalk will need to be demarcated in some way across the drives. This can be done with color, texture, or lines indicating the east and west edges of the sidewalk. B, rooftop mechanical equipment shall not be visible from the ground level. The applicant shall provide a sightline study to staff to determine if taller parapets or screens will be required. If taller parapets or screens are required, a revision to the CA shall be required to be reviewed and approved by staff. C, the applicant obtains approval from Embark to relocate the existing bus stop at Northwest 4th Street as shown in the site plan. D, the applicant obtains approval from the Traffic and Transportation Commission and City Council for the proposed on-street ADA parking space. E, that the applicant modifies the street tree from the current Arizona cypress to a deciduous canopy street tree that is currently on the approved street tree, Oklahoma City street tree list. And F, that the applicant provide revised drawings of the entrances showing the position of the car parked when using a potential post that is fully outside of the sidewalk, and that the width of it is noted to accommodate any kind of island or pedestal or such that might be required for the operation of the gate,
Okay.
as noted.
Oh, Eric, did you second? No, no.
I'll second.
Okay, please vote. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you, ladies
Thank
and
you,
gentlemen.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next on our item, communications.
What do we have?
Other business. No other business,
so-
communications.
Planning Department, we have a meeting on the 21st. You're going to get a very early quorum call, email because of the holidays, because I know people go out of town. Because the earlier, the better, that we know if we don't have quorum for the 21st. So please check your calendars. And I'm assuming by now you've written in all of your meeting dates for 2024.
Okay.
So, Katie, did you have something you wanted to say? Other than I'll say, have a happy Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you. Any comments from committee members? Okay, next meeting date, our regular meeting, committee meeting is Thursday, December 21st, 2023. New applications will be submitted to staff by 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 14th. If there's nothing else,